Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you so much for joining us for Social Work, Policy and Politics, the landscape ahead of November. My name is Rebecca Gomez, and it's my pleasure to serve as the interim dean here in the School of Social Work. This event is made possible by the C. Bernard Scotch Fund, established in 2011 in memory of Professor Emeritus Charles Bernard Burney Scotch, PhD. The fund supports programs that advance macro social work. If you believe in the importance of events and conversations like what the school is offering today, you can support the Scotch Fund using the link that's in the webinar chat. For those who may not be familiar with macro social work, it involves work at the system or organizational level that can impact large-scale change. These systems, to name a few, can include government, education, healthcare, criminal justice, and policy around the environment, which was the subject of this event last year. Social workers in this context can be policymakers, advisors, analysts, researchers, administrators, advocates, and elected officials. They may be working to change legislation to have a more positive effect on communities and populations that have been adversely affected. They may be researching new programs that can affect change with unjust social policy issues, or exploring new opportunities for economic development that are more inclusive and equitable. They may be educating and advocating for issues like cleaner energy and initiatives that help those most affected by climate change. By that same token, clinical social workers can also approach their work with a macro lens, so that they are bringing a perspective of social and racial justice to the populations that they work with and who may be affected by systemic issues and policies. Regardless of a social worker's role, it's imperative to stay informed and engaged in these overarching and interconnected systems, policies, and processes. The political landscape incorporates all these issues, and that landscape is never more relevant than in an election year. That's why the School of Social Work works to promote social work advocacy and participation in the political process. You can find nonpartisan resources to raise awareness through Voting as Social Work, a program from the University of Connecticut School of Social Work, and the link to that's in your webinar chat as well. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Alex Wagaman, Associate Professor here at the VCU School of Social Work and the moderator for today's discussion.
Thank you, Dean Gomez. Welcome, everyone. My name, as Dean Gomez said, is Alex Wagaman. I'm on faculty here in the School of Social Work, and excited to be moderating this discussion today, in particular, as we begin to think about the ways that all social workers can be engaged in the policy process, in the political process, in addition to identifying ways that we can engage the communities and clients that we work with in that process as well. Excited to kick us off. I'm going to start with a couple of housekeeping items, and then I'll jump in and introduce briefly our panelists, and then we'll get started with the discussion, because that's actually the most interesting part. So a couple of housekeeping items that we'd like to just make sure we establish from the beginning. Hopefully you all know when you entered the webinar, you got a signal that we were recording, but just want to reiterate the event is being recorded, and it will be made available at a later date by the School of Social Work, so that you can share it with others, or you can come back to it later, in addition to other resources that will be made available. We'd also like to highlight that we do have live closed captioning available. If you look at your toolbar, your Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen, you might have to move your cursor a little bit, but you should see a little box that has CC in it. It says live transcript at the bottom, and you can click there in order to activate the live captioning if that's something that you'd like. The recording will also have captioning available. And then lastly, there are a couple ways for you to engage, and we hope you will engage with us and with our panelists today during the discussion. At the bottom, there is a chat feature. If you decide to use the chat, we'd love for you to please change who you're directing the chat comment to, so that it says all panelists and attendees, so that we can all be engaging in the conversation together. You also are welcome to add questions there as we're having our conversation, or you can add them in the Q&A section, also to be found at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. And we will work through some predetermined questions to get started, and then we'll have time at the end to engage your questions as well. So we hope that you will add those there throughout. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce very briefly our three amazing panelists who we're so grateful to have joining us. And then we'll jump in, as I said, to the questions. First, I want to introduce LaShonda Singleton. LaShonda is a graduate of our BSW program here at VCU, which is very exciting, and also is currently the program coordinator for the Restorative Justice Initiative for the City of Richmond's Commonwealth's Attorney Office. LaShonda teaches in the School of Social Work, which we are very grateful for, and she also has state level policy and government experience. Second, we have Muna Saleh, and Muna is actually a PhD student in our School of Social Work. Muna has a wealth of experience in working with refugee communities, actually founded an organization that connects refugee families and communities to resources, and is studying policy, particularly focusing on the social and economic integration of refugees. And excuse me, be on the lookout for more of an announcement about this, but we're really proud for Muna's accomplishment as a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Health Policy Research Scholar. I had to use my cheat sheet for that. It's a really huge honor that Muna has been selected for that scholarship. And then third, Caroline Coral is also joining us. Caroline is an MSW graduate. Caroline, are you also a BSW grad? BSW and MSW. I thought that was probably the case. Caroline is MSW grad of our macro specialization and is currently a principal at CCR Strategies, and most recently served as Assistant Secretary of the Commonwealth under our former governor. So welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for being here, and we're really looking forward to the conversation. To kick us off, I'd love to pose a question to all three of you, and we can go in whatever order you like. So you can jump in whatever way you want. But our first question is, how did you get involved in the political process as a social worker? What is something that you learned along the way that you wish you had known earlier?
I'm happy to kick us off. Thank you for that question. I always like to say I got involved in the political sphere on accident. I had applied to the MSW program, had not yet been admitted, but kind of had this realization that I don't like clinical social work, and I am not very good at it. So then it kind of hit me that maybe the macro route is better for me. It's the last place I ever saw myself, but really enjoy it. And something I think I wish I would have known earlier is to just, it can be a little bit of a grueling realm, but it's worth it. And to just kind of ground yourself in knowing your worth and trusting your gut.
Thank you, Caroline.
I can go next. So I just want to start off by saying how happy and delighted I am to be here with all of you to engage in a very important conversation. Thank you to James, Anna, Jeff, Dean Gomez, Dr. Wagaman, and my fellow panelists, Caroline and LaShonda. It's great to see you all and be in community with you all. Very briefly, my research interests are examining how current refugee resettlement policies and related structural factors impact health. And like many social workers, those interests are born from my lived experiences as a refugee. And also as a practicing social worker, unfortunately, unlike Caroline, I realized too late that I wasn't into the clinical route because I already had gotten my clinical MSW. And I got really frustrated working in these communities, not being able to address the needs as equitably and or as efficiently as possible, because a lot of the the interventions were individualistic, endorsed a cultural bias. So it's really problematic to implement. And so my decision to pursue a doctoral degree was kind of born from those frustrations. It was to kind of just take a deeper look into how policies interface, because it was just so obvious to me working in the fields I was very limited in the institutional bounds I was operating in to really give equitable service to the communities I was working for. So that's how I got into it. And one thing I wish I would have learned sooner is the power of my voice and the power of political engagement and how different and varying it was. So sometimes we may engage in political activity and not know to call it that. So something as simple as writing a letter. I wrote a letter on a whim to my elected official that I found on Facebook, and to my surprise, they responded. And so knowing that how much they're willing to respond to you. I mean, that could be also self-interested, trying to get reelected later, but understanding how easily accessible it is if I were to put in the effort and it wasn't in vain. And that's something I wish I would have known sooner. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruna.
Well, for me, I think it wasn't by accident. I really believe that my journey in life really brought me to social work and to using my community engagement and my lived experience, intersectioning it with politics. And so for me, criminal justice has always been where I was most comfortable. So I knew going into social work, I really didn't want to do clinical, but I didn't know what other route I could go in where social work could be utilized. And so to be perfectly honest, Professor Wagaman, it wasn't until your policy class when I was in undergrad where I realized how social workers could truly have an impact in a criminal justice system and all systems involved, looking at it from a political and a legislative means. And so I guess for me, really focusing on returning citizens, individuals who are coming from incarceration currently and that have been in our communities for a while without those resources and out those support systems, and really looking at how our laws and our policies and the barriers that are set forth in the policies have really created this system of oppression and discrimination. And for me, that has really been my drive. And so it may be different than the other two panelists who accidentally, stumbled into this web. I believe that I was actually put forth on this path to really take on these changes.
Thank you so much, LaShonda. I'm really just sitting with, and maybe we'll come back to in the later questions, like the use of self, because I don't know we talk about that enough in policy or in politics, and all three of you mentioned that in different ways. We talk about it in clinical social work or in direct practice about use of self, but I heard all three of you talking about use of self, intentional use of self, and your worth and your power and your expertise. Thank you. All right, I'm going to jump to the second question. What are some ways that social workers can be engaged in the political process to advocate for and with populations that face challenges to their well-being? And I think Dean Gomez brought this up earlier, but in, kind of in relationship to this question, also thinking about social workers who may not have policy advocacy as part of their job description or their job role.
Well, one of the ways that I would say is, so for me, working with individuals who are in the criminal justice system, if they're incarcerated, they may not have the opportunity to utilize their voice. However, they have family members, they have support systems. And so really helping to educate those where the policies and the issues directly impact, and say it in layman's term where they can truly understand how and who sits in certain political positions can have a direct impact on them, and helping them share that experience and that understanding with their family members and their loved ones and their support systems, so that their loved ones can be the ones to utilize their voice and be a part of that, and still be able to be a part of the democratic process.
I would like to just echo what LaShonda said. I think I completely agree with that. And I also would like to just add, I know there's a bunch of students probably attending today. And we talked about it earlier when Dean Gomez talked about the difference between micro and macro, but I think there's a lot of room for micro social workers to also be politically engaged. But if you're, and I'll hold that for later, but if you're a macro track student, I definitely would recommend searching out for like specialized fellowships or scholarships that do that specialized training in policy and advocacy. I think MSW programs do a good job of just like introducing you to policy work, but it's not meant to like get you to be specialized in the field. I did that during my MSW and I absolutely loved it. It was just an additional training. So I definitely would advocate for more of a macro-based practicum field placement. And for the social workers that are already in the room, and if you're if you're a clinical or direct practice social worker, it may seem daunting or may seem like we're asking you to do a lot more to engage politically, because it seems like you have your work, and then, you know, to have to do the political stuff may seem that we're asking you to do more, but really it's what we do every day. It's the advocacy. We're in a position, I think, of especially clinical workers are in a position to really understand how policies interact with people's lives that I think macro social workers sometimes miss. And we'll talk about this later, but like values are a huge part in policy. So as a researcher, I know that a lot of times my very uniquely designed and sophisticated research projects may not have a lot of impact later on, but what does have impact is those individual stories and narratives. So I remember working for the state of Minnesota, we would frantically and diligently look for direct practitioners to share stories from the field, because at the end of the day, that's what made the difference, is those testimonies and direct experiences. It didn't matter how many, if you have the statistics to show it, so long as you were able to have a story or, and try to project some of those values. I think that's what made the difference at the end of the day. And I think that micro social workers are very well positioned and uniquely positioned to be able to politically engage in those ways. And so just knowing what legislation is moving through your state legislator is a great way in tracking those bills, and being able to disseminate those stories either through testimony in front of a committee or through writing in your local paper, or by just talking to other people about it.
And going to piggyback off there, you clinical workers are the boots on the ground, right? Like you, I think, have a really unique opportunity to build relationships with people, who are elected officials and work in space that really help change some of these policies to advocate and communicate for what you're seeing each and every day. Like Luna said, there are so many opportunities to testify to what you're seeing, in front of legislative committees or, meetings. And that, I think, is so much more powerful than, someone who isn't seeing it every single day. Another thing that I always try to encourage people who aren't in the political process, but would like to get more engaged, is to just read the news. I don't know if everyone is familiar with the Virginia Public Access Project. They do a really good job putting out every morning just clips, very short clip summaries about kind of what's going on in Virginia. And it's nonpartisan, really great resource. But I know sometimes reading the news can be troubling and make bubbles in your stomach, but I think it's important to really know what's coming down the pipe sometimes, and to take that a little bit further, really try to diversify where you're getting your information from. I would obviously love to, read news from certain outlets every single day, but I really do try to challenge myself to consume articles and news stories from sources that I don't always agree with, just to kind of get different points of view.
appreciating so much the conversation about our profession, because we, even within social work, can get siloed into kind of job roles or tracks or like, micro or macro. And more students have been saying, I'd really like to be able to do meso level work so that we can start to think about that bridging that happens. But I love that y'all are raising some of these ways that we could strategically be thinking about the real power of being connected to each other, and doing our part of the work, but then making sure that it connects to other aspects of change. Anything else about that?
Can I add one thing?
Please.
I think too, VCU has such a unique opportunity that we have such a strong clinical program, and we're also located in the capital of a state. So it almost creates a natural bridge in between the two of them, which I think is really a strength of the school.
And that's what I was gonna chime in on, how academia can really play a part in it as well. Because one of the things that I've noticed is there's an intersection between policy and social work. And so when we're even teaching our courses, there's ways that we can intersect policy in our curriculums to really help students get a better understanding of where to go to get information about a specific policy. Even if you're looking to become a clinician, right? What are going to be some of the regulations that you need to know? Those are policies and procedure that comes down, and there's a board that determines all of those things. And so I think if we as a school continue to, bring those things forward when we teach, I think that will also be a good way of getting individuals that openness and that opportunity, and also tools to be able to go and really research and see what is their belief and what are some of the policies and things that they would like to pursue.
If I could just add on to that too, because I completely agree. And I think a lot of times it can seem overwhelming when we ask social workers to be political social workers. But I think if there's just one thing that they can take away from it, it's just find something they're motivated and find something that you're very passionate in. And then if you're very busy like me, you probably don't have time to like navigate around the Virginia Legislator website. So there are countless agencies, advocacy organizations across the state that take the guesswork out for you. And they have very neatly, they put together a legislative agenda that coincides with a specific legislative session. So you can easily see what bills are being proposed in your interest areas or motivation areas. And you could specifically just look and track those and sign up for alerts on those, write to your legislator about those. But also the testifying part, it's such a big part. It's not that hard to do if you reach out and ask to do it, or especially with your expertise, but also encouraging your clients to do the same. I mean, we work with populations that have been oppressed, their political power have been stripped from them. And so being able to empower them and make them feel comfortable in becoming involved like that, especially with disenfranchised populations, I think could be very, very powerful. We ourselves don't always have to be politically engaged. We should also transfer some of that empowerment to, I think, our clients too.
I appreciate all these points so much, thinking about the demystifying the process right through what we teach and like what we get involved with. And that helps us to also then demystify the process for clients and communities that whose voices we actually need at the policymaking process, actively engaged and being heard. And in my own experience, doing some of those things myself helps me to then demystify it and walk alongside folks. Because just, being honest, even as a professor, some of it's super scary, right? You think like testifying sounds really intense and scary, and it feels odd, and you're in a building that you're not familiar with potentially. So being able to understand what that looks like and feels like, and then being able to work with other folks to do that can be a really powerful process. I want to shift gears a little bit and just ask, from y'all's perspectives, your vantage points, what do you think are some of the current issues in the midterm conversation that you think social workers are really well suited to engage with?
All of them. I think, I guess I'll elaborate on all of them. Like someone said a couple minutes ago, it's already slipped my mind who it was, pick your issue and run with it, right? Like we are experts in our fields, and whichever it is uh your your issue, it's important, and find groups that are working to elect individuals that support those issues.
100% agree. There isn't one issue that I could say to someone is the issue to vote for. I think that there's so many issues that impact people very differently, and I think you have to find what motivates you and what is an issue. A lot of the changes that happen they don't happen, or they don't occur because we have a Congress that is responsive to the electorate, right? They happen because of external pressure from extensive lobbying, coalition groups, but those people usually come because of something that has either happened to them or someone close to them or someone that they know. So find things that really motivate you. Right now, I think at a national, there's a lot of local things that are happening right now in the state, right? I'm from Minnesota. I just moved here last year, but boy, has it been, it's been kind of hard to figure out how Virginia works. Is so much different, but there's a lot going on here. I mean, trans rights is under attack right now. Education is huge right now. So I'm being moved by the students and the teachers and the social workers that are in the field that are able to testify bear witness at least to what's happening, and to be able to bring that back. But I think on a national stage, there's, inflation is wild right now. Abortion and reproductive rights is under attack. And we know from people who've taken social policy history courses, what has happened and other times when we've had the same issues we've been dealing with, specifically with inflation, thinking of Reaganomics in the 80s and how that issue wasn't felt the same way, right? It didn't hurt everyone the same way. Poor people, oppressed groups came off way worse than other groups. They were disproportionately impacted. So I think social workers were there for it then, we're here for it now. And I think that it's very important that our voices are at the table. There's that saying that legislation is decided by who shows up. And that's very important. If economists are the only ones showing up, values like equity are not really reflected in the policies. Efficiency maybe is. So I think we can feel who's showing up to these legislative hearings, whose voices are being reflected, whose values are being reflected. So it's very important that we show up as social workers too.
And I will have to agree to a certain point. Definitely all policies should be, but I think there's not enough talk about what's happening in our housing market and how gentrification is really affecting already, like, it's just making a really bad situation worse, because it's happening to communities that were already being discriminated against, being oppressed upon in those living conditions, and to be emotionally in that space and watch this transformation happen. And one, you're not a part of it. Two, you're not going to be a part of it. It's just a really hard thing to see. And I think it needs to be more conversation and more discussion about the gentrification that's happening here in the city and in our Commonwealth, right? And how that's having a domino effect on our education system, on our criminal justice system, on different policies and things that are going to be in place to really rev up and look at these different locations and localities, and how that's going to have a huge impact on where social work is really going to have to be needed in the hospitals, in our jails, in our schools. And I just think there's not a lot of conversation happening about those issues. And so, yes, I really do agree with the conversation of all issues we need to tackle. But I think really getting in with those communities where these issues are being affected and allowing their voices to really be heard, I think is where we need to also work a little bit more on and put some focus on.
Yeah, I'm thinking about a later question that maybe I'll go ahead and jump to, because I'm thinking about how social workers often feel like economics, physical infrastructure, right? Those are things that we're not necessarily specifically trained on, may not have expertise in. And y'all have mentioned, some students can take kind of active initiative to seek out additional training. But I'm curious in terms of like maybe a bit of a two-part question. What does it mean to be an expert, and how much is that required to be able to contribute? And then, kind of another piece of that is what are some of the things that social workers need to be more knowledgeable about to be able to contribute meaningfully to policy change?
I would say one thing that we really need to be knowledgeable of is cultural. We really need to understand the cultural awareness that needs to be had when we're working with policy, right? And understanding how historical factors need to be taken into consideration when we're creating policies. Because one of the things we would hate to create is a policy that we believe is great and it's amazing. But then we later on down the line see that there's some outcomes that came about because we didn't have all the right people at the table and we didn't ask those really tough questions that sometimes we don't want to have that conversation about, but we need to have that conversation. And so I think knowledge of everyone's space, like when you're going into someone's space and you're working on a policy with them, allow them to tell you what it is that they really need and be actively listening to receive what it is that the community is telling you, and not going with your already preconceived notion of what this community needs to be rescued. Some communities don't need to be rescued. They just need the proper tools to be given and explain how to use them so that they can be self-sufficient and self-sustaining. We have to stop with this attitude that we can be the one to go in and fix it. And just be knowledgeable that these communities are strong, they're resilient. Look at where they have come from and where they are and what they have achieved within their own units, and be able to utilize their strengths and, and show them that and help them to grow, and not just go in with our theories and, ways of thinking and think that that is the best. And so I just say, be open and authentic. Being authentic is definitely something else to have.
A million times agree with LaShonda there. I think what you just hit it really well. You just stated it very well, articulated it very well. The only thing I will add is that you just need to care. I think that if you care enough, we'll know what to do, and listening and giving the tools and the power. I mean, politics at the end of the day is just an expression of power. And so if when we're talking about being political social worker, to me, what that means is just in an anti-oppressive way, how do we redistribute power back? Because if we don't get to decide whose voices are uplifted, or what communities get to decide for themselves, how they envision themselves to be or to thrive, I think that that's where we can run into any issues. But I don't think, and I'm very uncomfortable with that this panel was also on the flyer as expert panel, because I don't know what all the issues that are pertaining to every situation. And that's why I was a little hesitant to say that there's some issues that are more important than others, because I know that for some folks, one policy is going to determine whether or not, their well-being, their well-being, while for another family it's completely different. So I think policies do impact families differently or communities differently. So I just wanted to co-sign 1000% with what LaShonda said.
I'm going to talk, I think, a little bit about the expert part of the question. I think the word expert is a social construct, right? Like a lot of especially in the political arena, it's very easy to feel that like imposter syndrome. But you know yourself, and if you believe that you're an expert of something, own it, right? Like LaShonda is a badass expert at restoring rights. And maybe she wouldn't call herself that. I would hope she would. But like I said, if you think that you're really good at something and that you can use that voice to do good, then own it. You're an expert.
I appreciate that so much, because thinking a lot about something one of my mentors said from a study she had done on like biggest influencers for people in policymaking positions, elected positions in particular. And one of the people she interviewed said that he consulted with his dental hygienist on specific policies decisions. And that's not true for all legislators at all, or policymakers. And for me, it just really hit home how much policymakers don't know and aren't experts on all the things they're being asked to vote on or contribute to. And they actually desperately need us. They need consultation. They need to know who are the right people to go to, who are the right people to ask. And so we are often in a place to be able to open doors and connect people and communities together. And to shift power, as Muna said, which I really appreciate, thinking about power shifting. I'm thinking that we've talked about this a little bit already, but just wanting to see if anyone wants to add anything to this question about where in particular you think social workers are uniquely positioned and equipped to impact the political process. Are there any, I'm thinking about in terms of the political process of voting, or even Muna's already brought up the point about like how ideas for policy get brought to people who then draft policy and move policy forward. Are there other specific places in the process that you think are important for us to consider as social workers?
I will start with, like, you hit the nail on the head, voting. If people don't already know this, Virginia is a weird state of, we have an election every single year. Not a lot of people know that. I could go up on my soapbox about why the Constitution designed it that way. I will spare everyone. If you'd like to talk about it more, I could talk about it all day. We can do that at another time. But also, and this talks a little bit about, Muna's comment about power. A lot of what I do and what I'm proud of is, there's always going to be a dynamic in this world of power and influence, but challenging that power and, putting that power to good use is kind of how I navigate this space. There's always going to be people who are making decisions, and there's always going to be an imbalance, unfortunately, but like, how do we use that imbalance to our what's the word I'm trying to say? And how do we use that? I'm blanking on the word.
See, it's our advantage.
Benefit. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Alex, I think social workers really need to be everywhere. I'm just going to be honest. We need to be in the police department. We need to be in the Commonwealth's Attorney's office. We need to be in the DA's office. We need to be everywhere, because what I believe social workers bring is a holistic approach to the individual, right? And it's like in our criminal justice system, they're thinking about safety, public safety. And I understand that. So who's thinking about the individual's safety, right? And so we bring that perception of, we have to look at this whole entire picture. And so I believe social work is needed everywhere. It needs to be in our communities where there are no voices. There needs to be with our children who are fostering out of foster care and have absolutely no idea what to do. And so I believe when it comes to where do we uniquely position ourselves, we need those social workers to be positioned everywhere. We need you to be versed in everything that's going on, whether you're a clinical social worker or whether you're a macro social worker, a meso social worker, just being knowledgeable of all social work. I think that's how we can uniquely position ourselves, where we can really start working together as that unit that we need to be, and not a silo of micro over here and macro over here and meso over there. We really have to see how we intertwine with each other in order to really be able to provide better sense of living for the communities and the individuals that make them up. And so I think it's really important for everyone that can, that's on this call and that can hear our voices, to know that if you are a social worker, you are uniquely positioned where you need to be, and start utilizing that voice in that space.
Minna, did you want to add anything?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Were you talking?
Oh, I said, did you want to add anything? I had a follow-up question, but I wanted to.
Oh, no, I didn't have anything to add. I just said also just making sure that we, I think to LaShonda's point, like connecting all the different positions too. If we want to take like an organism type theory where we are working as a profession that's responsive to each part, I think that the people working in communities and people working in the hospitals and people working in the meso and there should be like coalitions where we're working together. We're all responsive to each of those parts. If I would take like an organism like allegory.
I like that visually too. And something that LaShonda said, it made me think too, and we'll move in a minute to kind of some of the questions from the audience, but one of the things that we haven't touched as much on is just in terms of positioning, in terms of inside of systems, outside of systems, where do we push, where do we apply power or pressure, and what are the opportunities and the consequences, or like, I guess, costs and benefits to that. Because I know, to your point, LaShonda, we have lots of social workers working inside of systems, and then we have other folks working outside of systems who are trying to dismantle those systems. And so what does it look like, right, for us to be able to be working under the umbrella of the same profession? And some of that, I think, is a very personal choice about, like, how do we live into our values? How do we stay true to ourselves? But I wondered if any of the three of you wanted to comment on that.
I don't know if I'm missing the question, but just a thought that I think kind of relates back. As people are looking for jobs in the quote unquote social work profession, you don't have to have or get a social work job. I always people ask me all the time, like, oh, are you ever going to go do a social work job? And I'm like, yes, I'm doing the right thing, because I'm tricking them. I am a social worker, and I'm using my skill set to, like you said, challenge the system and bring a little bit of kind of the social work code of ethics into systems that don't typically otherwise follow them.
And I just want to quickly add that, in our NASW Code of Ethics, I mean, it does call us to be politically involved. So it is part of our values. I think social work is predominantly policies. Therefore, social workers must be political. So whether we want to or not, it's an expression of privilege, in my opinion, when people dismiss or invalidate efforts to become more politically engaged. Many people don't like politics. I don't like politics, but as a social worker and now a social work researcher, my job above all else is to advocate for those that are oppressed and to advocate for my people who look like me. So we cannot, as social workers, I think, continue to say we're not a political profession. So I think political engagement may not matter for individuals whose power the system is designed to uphold and protect, but it behooves anyone with an inkling for social justice who are not afforded the same protections on the law to be politically engaged. We cannot rely on a system to do that for us. And I think that major social work associations see that and call on us to do that. Unfortunately, we sometimes social workers are in institutions where you get called out for speaking out as being disrespectful or unprofessional. Somehow that's been labeled as a bad thing, and you're actually reprimanded for speaking out. And I think it's very, very hard. And I recognize that. It's very uncomfortable to be in those spaces, but try your best to look for alliance in those. There's people who think like you. There's great alliances you can make and affinity groups. And if you can, to try to get involved in more of the policies to kind of change it for either through legislative action or through just like the advocacy work that's happening at the local level, or a local NASW or NABSW chapter is one way to get involved. So I think leaning into our values, I mean, social work is political. And so I just wanted to say that.
And for me, when it comes to living into the values, one of the things I'm very proud of is to be the former past president of the Richmond Association of Black Social Workers, and also be a part of the National Association of Black Social Workers, because you're absolutely correct, right? One of my biggest things is I am a social worker for all people, but I do have a focus on people that look like me. And sometimes I am the only person that look like me in certain spaces. So it's always great to have that opportunity to be around social workers that look like me, and we can have those conversations and exchange thoughts and ideas so that I can stay true to my authenticity when I'm out in the field and I'm out in the community and I'm working with individuals that look like me. However, that takes nothing away from working in communities that do not look like me. Right? But just that understanding of knowing that there are a lot of things that are different between different communities, and being very versed and very specific when working with communities that look like me to take on those sensitivities and not reciprocate exactly the same thing that the systems have oppressed our people on. And so I'm very committed to the Black and Brown community and really focusing on what are some of those policies and helping to educate in languages that we can understand, whether it's using rap artists and hip hop in different visual art and things like that to get people that look like me to understand what's important about voting. Who are your elected officials in your area? What are some of the policies that you need to be thinking about that has a direct impact on you? That's truly how I stay true to myself and also to the profession.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to shift us to some questions that we have from the audience, if that's okay. And I think I'll start with, because as someone mentioned earlier, we likely have a lot of students watching today. And one student says, what would your advice be for a student who's deciding right now between the macro and clinical specialization route? Any advice?
I would say go where your heart takes you, because it's really, for me, I knew in my heart that I needed to be on someone's sofa. And so therefore I was not, the place for me was to be a clinical social worker, right? And so it's just knowing really where I felt most comfortable. And I'm very comfortable working in direct practice with those boots on the ground in the community, right? And so I would just say, test the waters, do an internship where you would not have thought to do that internship in one of those fields, and see if this is truly what you want to do before you make that final decision.
Anybody else want to speak to that? Okay. Let's see. So I've got a question about opportunities and tools for students to learn about social policy and the political process, and some questions about ways that you feel like the School of Social Work here at VCU either can or should provide opportunities for students to gain more skills, experience, knowledge.
So, as adjunct professor, I'm gonna throw some academia stuff in there. And so what I really, and then also being a graduate of the School of Social Work in 2014 and going through the program, right? And so one thing that I would really love to see is more application for the students, more community engagement courses where we're actually using the tools that we're talking about in that setting, so that the students can have that hands-on experience in certain settings, that when they graduate, it's no question, it's automatic. Yes, I can do this. I know exactly what that tool is and how I can apply it in those various ways. So almost looking at it like a medical school where you have to do so much hands-on before you can, move on to your next course.
Thanks, LaShonda.
I think the school already does a very good job of, connecting its students to resources that, for students who might be interested in the macro profession. I do think that there is an opportunity for, whether it be electives or classes, that students who are interested in learning more about the macro profession or the policy route, then they could make a little bit more of an informed decision rather than just blindly picking one, and then it's hard to go back. And maybe that doesn't even look like a required 4-credit course. Maybe it's just, some seminars or some discussion groups that you can go to by choice if you want to learn more about, what macro social workers do.
I got a couple questions. I'm going to kind of combine them and ask about, in your experiences, about other disciplines that you've worked with or other knowledge bases that you've wanted to draw from, like maybe law or public health. Where have you found some of those alliances that Muna referenced earlier in other professionals or other professions? Or have you found it valuable to learn more in other areas like law?
I will say that, a lot of the things that we do in social work in general, I think a lot of disciplines do envy our discipline just because we do work multidisciplinary. And a lot of other, I think disciplines are very inward looking. So I think we do enjoy a lot of borrowing from a lot of different disciplines. And I think that's to our advantage. I think what's unique, it's like value based, of course. But I think public health is like a sister profession for us. And I think there's a lot more work that's being done, more critical work that's being done, socially critical work that's being done in other disciplines. For example, in my specific area, and also in mental health more generally, a lot of the theories or a lot of the interventions that we do are individually based. So there's an individual bias. And so we are seeing more and more work that's being done to address more upstream policies, to kind of intervene more at the macro scale. And so I think that is one great way that we can borrow from other fields, as well as with social work, using theories that kind of help explain some of the social phenomena that we observe, but more from an upstream kind of perspective.
This question hits home because I feel like every day I'm like, oh gosh, I should have gone to law school. So yeah, I find, especially being very heavy in the policy in the government realm, that I spend a lot of my time working with attorneys. Some of my coworkers have deemed me an honorary attorney. Again, imposter syndrome. But yeah, work very closely with lawyers, and I have a lot of respect for them.
And for me, being so boots on the ground, I think it's exactly what Caroline said. Definitely lawyers, but also medical professionals, because I'm working with individuals with substance use and mental illness. And so drawing from their understanding of treatment, what do they use for treatment and medications, and being able to help, clients understand, oh, you feel this way because of the medication and not because of a trauma or something that you're associated with. And so understanding and being able to have those conversations with your clients and being knowledgeable about the interactions of different things to help them to better understand some of the things that are happening with their bodies. So I think it's like Muna said, that in that multidisciplinary field is definitely what I feel as though a social worker definitely will really be versed in, because you need to know all of those, definitely all of those different systems, depending upon what area you're really focused and working in.
Thank you. So we are very close to being out of time. Would love to just make space if anyone would like to just make closing remark, and then we'll turn it back over to Dean Gomez. Any final thoughts or comments from the panelists?
I would just like to encourage anyone to go to restore.virginia.gov. If you want to see if you have a criminal background, or if you just want to see if you have your rights restored, please go and check. And if so, it will direct you to the Department of Elections webpage so that you can register to vote. And I would just encourage everyone, totally bipartisan, but just please go out and take part in the election process.
And you can vote now. You don't have to wait until election day. And if you need to know where to vote, to check if you're registered, you can go to iwillvote.com. Very helpful website.
Okay. All right, Dean Muna, did you have any? Oh, okay. All right. Back to Dean Gomez. Thank you all so much. Really enjoyed this conversation. I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you. I just want to thank you all for a great discussion, great comments and dialogue, and just a really fun time visiting. And thank you to our audience for some really great questions and comments as well. Thanks, Alex, for moderating, and thank you to our panelists, Caroline, LaShonda, and Muna. Really appreciate y'all. We will be sending a follow-up email with a link to the archived video of today's panel discussion and all the resources referenced so that you can add them to your toolbox. Y'all have a great afternoon, and thank you for sharing your lunchtime with us.